The silence in my office was deafening. It wasn't the quiet of peace. It was the suffocating kind. The kind where you're on the edge of a cliff, feeling the wind rush by, but unable to look down. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, almost mocking me as I sat there, staring at the papers in front of me. My fingers hovered just above the contract. The ink wasn't dry yet, but it felt like it had been there for years. It was final. There was no going back now. In just a few minutes, everything would change. My entire life, my family's life, would be flipped upside down. I glanced at my phone, messages piling up from my team, reminders of the deals I'd sealed, the companies I'd taken over. But none of that mattered right now. None of it mattered as much as this moment, as much as the fact that, for the first time, I would reveal to my family just who I had become. The family who had written me off, who had called me the failure, who had expected me to follow the exact same path they had. They would all see today, in less than an hour, that I wasn't the person they thought I was. The woman sitting at this desk wasn't their daughter. She wasn't the artist who had failed to live up to their expectations. No, this woman was a businesswoman, a leader, and the architect of her own success. Today, I would show them what I had built, the empire I had quietly created, the empire they never even knew existed. I reached for the pen, the one that would finalize it all. I could almost feel the weight of it in my hand. In just a few minutes, everything will change. And I wasn't afraid anymore. The house was as I remembered it, meticulously perfect, just like the people who lived inside. The tall windows, the perfectly manicured lawn, the walls lined with pictures of family milestones, my father's career triumphs, Olivia's accolades, and of course, every little thing they'd done to prove their success. As I walked in, the familiar scent of expensive cologne and polished wood hit me. The weight of expectations immediately pressed down on my chest. It wasn't just the house, it was the people in it. The unspoken pressure to conform, to be the person they wanted me to be, to fit into a mold that was never mine. I could hear the distant sound of my father's voice in the next room, discussing business deals like they were nothing, like he owned the world. My sister, Olivia, was probably somewhere nearby, perfect as always, the golden child, the one who followed the rules and made the family proud, the one who did everything they expected, but not me. I wasn't the one who went to law school. I wasn't the one who made the right choices in their eyes. I wasn't the one who would take over the family legacy. No, I was the one who didn't fit, the one who wasted her time with art and foolish dreams. My father had always said, "You could have had everything. You could have been a part of something much bigger, but instead, you chose this. This." He always said it like it was the worst decision of my life, like it was the one thing that made me a disappointment to him. He didn't see the hours I spent creating something of my own. He didn't see the sacrifices I made to build something that would one day rival everything they had worked for. But today, I was about to change that. Today, they would see the truth. They would finally understand what I had been doing while they lived their lives, assuming I would always be the failure. I wasn't the disappointment they thought I was. I was something far bigger. As I sat in my car outside the house, the familiar ache settled in my chest. It was like a constant companion, always there when I had to face them. I could hear their voices from the window, laughing, talking business, their world so clear, so structured, so perfect. And then there was me, always the odd one out, always the one who didn't fit the picture. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady my breath. The decision I made years ago still felt like a heavy burden sometimes. The choice to leave law school, to pursue something they thought was a waste of time, art. It wasn't even a real career in their eyes. But what they didn't know was that I didn't see it that way. The years I spent working late into the night, building something from nothing, the countless projects, the freelance gigs, the struggles of a small studio that no one believed in. But I knew that all of it was leading somewhere. "You'll never make it," my father had said once. "There's no future in art." But he didn't know that I was building more than just a business. I was building my own future, one where I didn't have to answer to anyone but myself. It wasn't about proving him wrong. Well, maybe a little. It was about showing that my dreams weren't as foolish as he thought. I could feel the doubt creeping in again as I walked toward the door. Would they see the success I had created, or would they still look at me like I was throwing my life away? The truth was, I was tired of pretending, tired of keeping secrets. The empire I'd built wasn't small. It wasn't just a side project anymore. Today, they would know. Today, they'd see the life I had created, the success that came from something they would never understand. I knocked once, twice, then the door swung open, and just like that, my life as the failure was over. The weight of the moment hung in the air as I stepped deeper into the house. The familiar rooms, the polished surfaces, the silence. It all felt like I was walking into a different life, one that I no longer belonged to. The walls seemed to stare back at me with judgment, with the unspoken question, "How long are you going to keep pretending?" My heart was beating faster now. I could hear the quiet buzz of the conversation from the next room, my father's voice low and commanding. His words had always held power in this house. And Olivia, she was always ready to back him up, the perfect daughter, the one who had followed the path they set out for her, the one who had never disappointed them. But I wasn't her. And today, they were going to find out exactly who I had become. I could already imagine my father's face when he found out. How he would look at me, trying to hide the disbelief, the pride he had never been able to show. But the truth was, I had been silently building something that had grown beyond his wildest expectations. I made my way to the kitchen where my mother was busy preparing dinner. She glanced up, and for a split second, I saw a flash of concern in her eyes. She had always worried about me, especially when I chose to follow my own path. But today, I wasn't here for their worry or approval. I was here to reveal the truth. I reached into my purse and pulled out the document that would change everything, the contract that finalized my acquisition of Blackwell Capital. The very company they had spent their lives building, the company they assumed would be passed down to Olivia. I looked at my mother, who gave me a tentative smile. I returned it, but this time it wasn't the smile of someone who sought validation. It was the smile of someone who had nothing left to hide. "Mom," I said quietly, "it's time they knew." She blinked, confused, and then I handed her the contract. The door creaked slightly as I stepped inside, the familiar sounds of my family's home wrapping around me. I felt the heaviness of their expectations, almost like a tangible force that pressed against me. Every inch of this place, every polished surface, was a reminder of what I hadn't achieved in their eyes. But today, none of that mattered. Today, I wasn't walking in as the disappointment anymore. I felt my heart racing as I walked through the hallway, past the family photos lining the walls, my father's smile in a framed picture on the shelf, standing proudly with business partners. Olivia, always the golden child, smiling in her graduation photo, accolades neatly stacked beside it. It was their world, one I had never quite fit into. I stopped just outside the door to the study, where I could hear my father's voice in the other room, his words sharp and filled with authority. He was discussing a new business venture, probably something that would further cement his legacy. My hands tightened around the folder in my hand, the contract, the one that would change everything. I wasn't just going to hand it to him and watch as he figured it out. No, today I was going to show them just how wrong they were about me. I walked straight into the room, my footsteps steady but loud in the otherwise quiet house. "Dad, Olivia," I began, my voice cutting through the low murmur of their conversation. Both of them looked up in surprise. My father's expression immediately shifted from calm to guarded, but I didn't let that stop me. I held the folder in front of me, my fingers brushing the edges of the paper. I wasn't going to hesitate now. "I've been building something you'll never understand. Something bigger than this," I said, my words deliberate, but not without weight. "And today, it's time you knew." I placed the folder on the table between us, sliding it over to where my father sat, his hands still resting in front of him. He didn't move at first, staring at the contract, his brow furrowing in confusion. Olivia's eyes flickered between the papers and me, sensing the shift in the air, but not fully grasping it yet. For the first time, my father seemed uncertain, his posture stiffening. He reached for the document slowly, flipping it open with a furrowed brow. "What is this?" he asked, his voice hoarse, a thread of disbelief creeping into his tone. This isn't right. You can't just—" I cut him off. "I can. I did." And just like that, everything I had been hiding, everything I had worked for, was about to be exposed. They would know that the empire I had been quietly building, the one they dismissed, was now real. And it was mine. The living room was just as I remembered it, pristine, untouched, and cold. I stood just inside the door, my hands tightly gripping the folder that held everything. My father's voice still echoed in my ears, louder now, almost as if the weight of his disappointment had followed me here, shadowing my every move. But this time, I wasn't here to shrink away. I wasn't the same person I had been when I left this house all those years ago, full of doubt and fear of rejection. No, today I had something to show. Today I had something that would make them finally understand what I had done with my life. I walked further into the room, my footsteps steady, but each one seemed to resonate louder than the last. The anticipation weighed heavy in the air, but I kept my eyes forward. This was it. I had made my decision. I wasn't going to let them continue thinking I was the one who had failed. The folder was still in my hand, its contents a stark contrast to the perfect family life they had always painted for me. I could hear my father's voice in the next room. He hadn't even noticed I had arrived yet. His words were sharp, calculating, lost in the world of business deals and acquisitions. Meanwhile, Olivia was probably playing the perfect daughter somewhere, giving them exactly what they wanted. And there I was, the one who didn't fit, the one who was supposed to just be a dreamer, not someone who could actually build something. I could almost hear their voices in my head. Why are you wasting your time? This isn't a career, it's a hobby. But I had spent years building something real, something I knew would change everything. And today, I wasn't going to hide it any longer. As I walked through the hallway, I passed the photos, memories of a life that had never fully included me. There was my father, younger, smiling with his colleagues. Olivia, radiant in every frame, her perfect grades and perfect smile, confirming what they all wanted to believe about her. And then, my picture, tucked in the corner, an old photo from a family gathering, the only one that existed because they couldn't ignore me completely. I stopped in front of the door to the study. The faint noise from the other room was growing louder. There he was, still talking about numbers and profits, like they were the only things that mattered. It was time. I couldn't wait any longer. I knocked once, then entered. My father and Olivia both looked up in surprise. I could see the questions in their eyes, the confusion, the curiosity. They weren't expecting this. I walked straight to the desk, placing the folder down in front of them. "This is the deal," I said, my voice steady, unwavering. "The company you've spent your entire lives building, I bought it." There was a pause, a long, thick silence. My father's face went pale, his eyes flickering between the contract and my face. Olivia's lips parted, but no words came out. "You what?" My father's voice was barely above a whisper, full of disbelief. I didn't flinch. "I've been building my own company for years, and now it's time you know who I am, what I've done, what I've created. I'm not the failure you thought I was." I waited for them to process it, the words sinking into the silence. I wasn't the one who had to explain myself anymore. The silence that followed my words was almost suffocating. My father's hands shook slightly as he stared at the contract in disbelief. Olivia, frozen, had no words. She could barely process what she had just heard. I waited, letting the tension build before breaking the quiet again. "You don't believe me? Fine," I said, leaning forward slightly. "But here's the truth. Over the past 2 years, I worked with a network of silent investors. Through shell companies, I quietly acquired controlling shares, one transaction at a time. You never saw it, because you never thought to look." Their eyes widened as the weight of those words hit them. They had always assumed I was just an artist, a dreamer with no real plan. But I wasn't. Every business deal I made, every strategy I used, none of it happened overnight. It had all been a carefully executed plan, and now it was too late for them to undo it. I looked at them both, my father still processing, Olivia now with a mix of shock and disbelief. They had spent years underestimating me, writing me off as the failure who couldn't fit into their world. But the truth was, I had been living in their world, building my own empire, quietly taking the reins from beneath them. "You were never supposed to see it," I continued, watching their faces. "Because you never looked for it. You never thought I could outsmart you, outwork you. But I did. And now I own Blackwell Capital, the company you thought would always be yours." I could feel the shift. For the first time, they saw me as more than just the outsider, the rebel. They were finally beginning to understand that I had created something far beyond their expectations. The room grew colder the moment the truth hit them. My father's face had gone ashen, his hands trembling slightly as he turned the page of the contract, his mind struggling to make sense of the words in front of him. Olivia, usually so composed, looked like she had just been slapped. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The disbelief was written all over her face. For the first time, I wasn't the one shrinking under their scrutiny. This time, I was the one who held the power, and they had no idea how to handle it. "You bought Blackwell Capital?" my father repeated, the words slipping from his mouth like they didn't belong. His voice had lost its usual authority, a tremor creeping into it. He had always believed that this company would eventually be his legacy, passed down to Olivia, maybe even to me, if I ever grew up and joined the family business. But today, he was staring at the realization that the empire he'd built was now under the control of someone he had always viewed as his failure. I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. The silence between us was thick with all the words we hadn't said, the years of judgment, the assumptions they had made about me. It all hung in the air like a cloud of unspoken resentment. "You couldn't have," Olivia finally managed to speak, her voice faltering. "How? What gives you the right?" I could feel the fire in her words, but this time it didn't sting. It didn't bother me like it used to, because I wasn't asking for her approval. I wasn't asking for anyone's approval anymore. I had already built what they thought was impossible. "I built it," I said, each word sharp, clear. "I didn't need your approval. I didn't need to follow your path to prove that I could do something of my own. All these years, I've been building something bigger than you could ever see. And now, you're going to have to watch me take over." I watched them closely as they processed it, saw the subtle shifts in their expressions. For once, they were the ones on the back foot. For once, they were the ones who didn't know how to react. They had thought I was just an artist, someone who would never make it. But I wasn't just creating. I was conquering. I had built an empire, my empire, and today they would see that they'd been wrong all along. The silence between us was suffocating. My father's eyes flickered between the contract and me, his fingers shaking as he turned the page slowly, like he was hoping to find something that would prove he was reading it wrong. But there was nothing there except the truth, my truth. "You're serious?" Olivia asked, her voice finally catching, her breath shallow. Her gaze shifted nervously between the contract and me. She was the one who had always been the perfect daughter, the one who had followed the rules, the one who had never stepped out of line. But today, she was forced to face the truth I had been living with for years. I had done what they never believed I could do, and I did it without them. "Yes," I replied, my voice even, unwavering. "I bought Blackwell Capital. I own it now." It was like watching the world tilt on its axis for them. They couldn't reconcile the reality before them with the version they had always known. They couldn't understand that I had created something that would rival the empire they had built over decades. The shock was written all over their faces. This wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to be this person. But as the words settled into the silence, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of peace. This was the moment I had worked for. Every late night, every rejection, every unspoken doubt from them, it had led to this. To the moment when I could stand here and show them that I wasn't just the person they thought I was. I was more. The room seemed to close in around us, the tension thick, but I felt liberated. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one on the defensive. The look on my father's face, confusion mixed with anger, wasn't a look I had ever seen him give me before. And Olivia, that shocked expression, the realization that everything she had worked for, everything she thought she knew about success, was being challenged in real time. I did this, I repeated, because you never thought I could. I built a path where there was none. I made my own. And now, this company, your legacy, is mine. I saw my father's lips move, but no words came out. Olivia stood frozen, as if the truth had knocked the breath out of her. For once, the quiet family dinners, the uncomfortable silences, the judgments, they all felt like a distant memory. Because today, I wasn't just a part of their world. Today, I had carved my own space in it. I had shown them exactly who I was. The days after the reveal felt strange. The atmosphere around the house had shifted. It wasn't immediate, but it was there. The way they looked at me had changed. Just a little, but enough to make it clear that they were beginning to understand something. Something I had always known, but that they had never truly seen before. The change wasn't in their words, but in their silence. My father's usual stern tone when he spoke to me had softened. He still didn't fully understand what I had done or why, but there was a flicker of acknowledgement in his eyes. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Olivia, for once, didn't have anything to say. She had always been the one who spoke first, who was ready with a comeback, a criticism, a piece of advice. But now, she was quiet, almost cautious around me. It wasn't that I was some sort of untouchable figure. It was more like they didn't know where to place me anymore. I spent hours in the office, checking in with the team, making sure everything was running smoothly. But every now and then, a message would pop up on my phone. A text from my father, something simple like, "How's the business going?" It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to show that he was starting to see me as more than just the daughter who had chosen a different path. The tension between us wasn't completely gone, but the old judgment, it was fading. There was a new respect in the air. And for the first time, I felt like I had carved out a place for myself in this family. But the truth was, they were still learning to see me for who I was. I wasn't their failure anymore. I wasn't the one who had wasted her life. I was the one who had taken the very thing they had built and made it something entirely new. It wasn't instant, but it was noticeable. The subtle shifts in their behavior, the way they spoke to me, the way they treated me. It wasn't exactly the warm welcome I'd hoped for, but it was different. The walls that had once been there, built from years of judgment and misunderstanding, were starting to crack. I'd been working late into the night, preparing for the next big steps. But it wasn't until I returned home one evening that I noticed it. My father, who had barely looked at me without a scowl for the past decade, was sitting at the dining table, waiting for me. A bottle of wine sat in the center of the table, the two glasses in front of him untouched, but clearly meant for something more than just a drink. He didn't say anything at first. Just the simple gesture of waiting for me was enough. I sat down across from him, wondering where this conversation was going to go. "I've been thinking," he started, his voice low. "I wasn't fair to you. I thought I knew what was best for you, what you should do, what you could do. I was wrong." The words felt foreign coming from him. For years, he had been the pillar of certainty in our family, a man who never questioned himself, never doubted his decisions. But there he was, the strongest man I'd ever known, admitting that he had been wrong about me. "I see it now," he continued, meeting my eyes. "You didn't need me to approve of you. You built something great on your own. I didn't want to see it before, but now I can." For a moment, I couldn't speak. There was too much history between us, too much unspoken pain for those words to be a simple resolution. But it was a start I hadn't expected, but one that meant everything. We didn't talk about the business immediately after. Instead, we sat in silence for a while, each of us processing what had just happened. There was no apology from him, no need for one. The acknowledgement was enough. Later that evening, as I was heading back to my office, Olivia came to find me. She had always been the more controlled one, always poised, always right. But this time, she wasn't offering advice or criticisms. She was standing there, looking at me, unsure of what to say. Then, she finally spoke. "I didn't get it before," she said softly. "But now, I do. You're not just the artist anymore, are you?" I nodded slowly. She wasn't offering some grand gesture, but it was the first time in years that I saw something other than judgment in her eyes. She wasn't perfect, and I wasn't trying to make her see me as anything other than who I was. But in that moment, I realized something. That recognition, that quiet respect from both of them was enough. I had achieved something bigger than I could have imagined. Not just in the business world, but in this family, with the people who had never fully seen me for who I was. Now they did. The city stretched before me like a canvas, lights twinkling below as I stood on the terrace, looking out at the horizon. For a moment, everything felt still, almost surreal. I had spent so much time fighting, proving myself, trying to build something that would earn the respect I felt I deserved. But now, standing here, it wasn't about earning anyone's approval anymore. It was about what's next. What had I really achieved? I had already proven to myself and to them that I was more than what they thought. The business, the empire, it wasn't just a victory, it was a new beginning. The hard work, the hours spent in front of screens, the sacrifices, it had all led me to this moment. But I wasn't done. The future was wide open. I could see the opportunities ahead of me, the projects I could start, the people I could help. The world was full of potential. It was strange in a way, because for so long I had felt trapped, like I was fighting against a wall. But now that wall was gone. I turned back to my office, where the next steps awaited. The contracts were signed, but this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a much bigger picture, and I was ready to paint it. The only thing holding me back now was the limits I put on myself. But those limits had been shattered. I wasn't looking back anymore. I wasn't going to let the past define me, or the expectations others tried to place on me. It was time to move forward. The next chapter had already begun. As I stood there, watching the city below, it became clear to me. This was more than just a victory. It was a new beginning, not just for me, but for anyone who has ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or told they wouldn't amount to anything. Today, I'm not just here to share my success. I'm here to remind you that your story doesn't have to follow anyone else's script. We all have our moments of doubt, the moments when we feel like we're on the outside looking in. But it's in those moments that we find our true power. You don't need anyone's permission to chase your dreams. You don't need their approval to make your mark on the world. The journey I've been on wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And if you're watching this, wondering whether you can do it too, you can. If I can turn my life around, build something from the ground up, you can too. So take that first step. Do it afraid, do it messy, just do it. Your dreams are waiting for you, just like mine were waiting for me. And trust me, the world is ready for what you have to offer. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or called a failure, this is your reminder. You're not. You just haven't shown them yet.